Hello class, this is your test 4 review. I'm going to work through this as fast as I can, and after you watch the review, if you will, go through and try to do the review that I have in Canvas. Alright, so let's start with the first problem. This says express the interval in set builder notation and graph the interval on a number line. Alright, so this is from -8 to 8. Notice there's a parentheses with the -8 and there's a bracket with the 8. So this is going to be x where, that's what this long line, I'm going to show you how this reads, x where x is greater than -8 and less than or equal to +8. Alright, and a lot of times we'll have these little curly braces around each side. So again, this is x where, see, x is greater than -8 and less than or equal to +8. And then if we want to put that on a number line, I'm going to come over here, I'd put, say, a parentheses at my -8, and then I'd put a bracket at my +8, and then I would shade everything in between the two. Alright, so that's how you would work that problem. Alright, and so let's look at the different set builder notations we have here. This one doesn't have an equal to sign, so it can't be that with the +8. This has an equal to sign with the +8, and it doesn't have an equal to sign with the -8, so that one's looking good. This one has equals, so that's wrong, and this one doesn't have both numbers, so that's wrong, so it's got to be B. Alright, number 2 says to use the graph to determine the x and y intercepts. Alright, so we just want to look at where do we cross the x-axis? That's our x-intercepts. And where do we cross the y-axis? That's our y-intercepts. So it looks like we're going to cross the y at 1, 2, 3. So the y-intercept is going to be 3. And then it looks like we're going to cross the x-axis where? At -1 and at 1, 2, 3, +3. Alright, so remember we could write all of those as ordered pairs, but that's not how the answers are given. So we want to make sure we get y equals 3. Any of these that have, like this has 2 different y-intercepts, so you know it can't be that one. This one has 2 y-intercepts, so it can't be that one. So both of these have just 1 y-intercept, and it is 3. As you can see, we have 2 x-intercepts, so -1 and 3, so it's got to be C. Alright, find the slope of a line passing through the pair of points, or state that the slope is undefined. So we have 2 points here, and remember our slope formula. Slope equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So if you have enough room here, you may want to come over here and label your x sub 1 and y sub 1 and your x sub 2 and your y sub 2. That way you won't get them mixed up. Also notice that you have minuses in the formula. So since you have a minus in the formula here and a minus in the formula here, when you plug in your y sub 1 and your x sub 1, if they are negative, you'll have minus a negative, which is a positive. So let's see what happens. So we have m equals y sub 2 is 3 minus y sub 1 is 3. 3 minus 3, we know what that gives you. And then in the denominator, x sub 2 is -2 minus x sub 1 is 6. So 3 minus 3 is 0. And then -2 minus 6, well, we know that's going to give me a -8. But if we say 0 divided by any number, except possibly 0, we always get 0. So if 0 is in your numerator, then you're going to get 0. So that's a slope of 0. If we would have had a 0 in the denominator, the slope would be undefined. But there was a 0 in the numerator, so that's 0. Alright, The next problem says, use the given conditions to write an equation for the line in point-slope form. So remember point-slope form. It's y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. And m is the slope, and x sub 1 and y sub 1 come from your point. And also remember, we have a negative here, and we have a negative here. That's part of the formula. So here's my x sub 1 and my y sub 1 right here, and here's my slope. And if we want point slope, all right, then that's all I need is a point and the slope. So that's y minus, and then y sub 1 is 2, equals m, the slope was 4, times x minus, and now my x sub 1 is negative 6. So it's going to be minus negative 6, which makes that a plus 6. Now I don't want to solve for y here because it asked me for point slope form. That's point slope form. If the problem would have said slope intercept form, then we would want to make it y equals. But it said point slope form. All right, so let's see which one it is. That's going to be C. Number 5 says, use the given conditions to write an equation for the line in slope-intercept form. All right, so the way I like to work these problems, and there's a couple of ways you can work a problem like this, but what I like to do is first put the problem in point-slope form, and then we'll change it over and put it into slope-intercept form. All right, so I'm going to write down my point-slope form formula again. I'm going to plug everything in, and then I'll do what I have to do to make it y equals. So this is y minus, I didn't label my point, but there's my x sub 1 and my y sub 1. So y minus 3 equals, m is negative 2, so negative 2 times x minus, and x sub 1 is negative 7. So I'm going to have minus negative 7, which would be plus 7. All right, so that's point-slope form. I want slope-intercept form. So to put this in slope-intercept form, I first want to distribute my negative 2. So I have y minus 3 equals negative 2x minus 14. And then I want to get my y by itself, so I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I have y equals negative 2x, and that's going to give me minus 11. So make sure you check your signs, because sometimes they'll just change a sign. Like A looks like it could be the answer, but look, it's plus 11. But if we look at C, negative 2x minus 11. So it's got to be C. All right. Number 6 says to graph the equation. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. What I like to do, if it's a simple linear equation, I like to find the x and y intercepts. But that's not the only way to work it. So if you don't like to work it that way, you can always make a table. So you can make a t-chart. Some students like to do that. But for me, it just makes more sense, but it's the way my brain works. To find the x-intercepts, you set y equal to 0 and solve for x. So in my equation, where I have a y, I'm going to make that a 0. And now solve for x. Just add 5 to both sides, and I'll have x equals 5. So what that tells me is this thing has to cross at x equals 5. And then if I find the y-intercepts, I do just the opposite, I guess you could say. I set my x equal to 0 and solve for y. Well, if I set my x equal to 0, that's going to give me y equals negative 5. So put a point at negative 5. And now if I connect the points like that, that's my graph. Again, you can make a table. You can first put your y-intercept and then use the slope. You can do that all kind of ways, but that's the way that I like to do it. All right, so if we look at our choices, there's only one choice that looks like that, right? And that's D. All right, this one wants me to graph x equals -3. Sometimes students get a little confused if you don't have the whole equation there, like y equals mx plus b or something. But this is actually pretty easy to graph. So if you go to where x equals -3 and you put a point, now it wouldn't make sense for me to draw a line left to right. If I draw a line left to right, that would be every x value. So the only other way I could draw a line, if I'm not going to draw a horizontal line, I draw a vertical line. And so that's what I do. I just draw a vertical line straight up and down that goes through x equals -3. So that's the graph. All right, so that's got to be A. All right, the next one here, well, looky here. This one says to graph by finding the x and y intercepts. So we should already know how to do that because I showed you how to do that 2 problems ago. So I'm going to first find the x-intercepts. So to find the x-intercepts, you set y equal to 0 and solve for x. So where I have, and I'll erase this, but where I have a y term, see it's a -12y, I'm just going to make that term a 0. It's going to go away. So I have -6x minus 12 equals 0. All right, so now solve for x, and that's where my x-intersection point will be, or my x-intercept. So add 12 to both sides, and I get -6x equals 12. Divide both sides by -6, and so I get x equals -2. So I know that I'm going to cross at -2. And earlier I said something about, well, you know that's actually the point, and that's actually the point -2, 0. But I'm going to put a point at -2, 0 right there. All right. Now to find my y-intersection point, or my y-intercept, I'm going to do just the opposite. I'm going to set x equal to 0. So let me erase this here. Where I have an x term, I'm going to make that a 0. So it just goes away. So I have -12y minus 12 equals 0. Add 12 to both sides. So I have -12y equals 12. Divide both sides by -12. So y equals 12 divided by -12 is -1. We could write that as a point. That's the point 0, -1. So I want to graph that. 0 on the x, -1 on the y. That's this point. And those points are pretty close together, so be careful when you draw your line. All right, so it should look like that. All right, so if we, and notice that all of the answers have intercepts too. So in case you can't find the graph, which I think you can find it here at D, it's also we're going to have the intercept 0, -1, and we have the intercept, well, and we're going to have the intercept, did I mess up whenever I was doing this? +12, +12, divide by -12, divide by -12. That is y equals -1. So that's right. And then, let's see, +12. This is -6x plus 12. So I did something wrong. Do you know what I did wrong? This is -2, 0, not +2, 0. All right, so my mistake is this one right here. It's a good thing that I double checked that by writing those points down, right? So the one that goes through, it's got to go through -2, 0, and it's got to go through 0, -1. So it's got to be B. All right, sorry about that. But at least I caught my mistake by writing the points down, because these points are also written there. All right, number 9, find the slope and y-intercept of the graph of the equation. The easiest way to find the slope and y-intercept is to make the equation y equals. So let's do that. So I have 5x minus 9y minus 45 equals 0. So I want to make this y equals. So I'm going to move the 5x over by subtracting 5x from both sides, and I'm going to move the negative 45 over by adding 45 to both sides. So let's see what that does. Gets rid of my x, gets rid of my constant. I'm left with negative 9y equals negative 5x plus 45. Now I want to get my y by itself. I want to make it y equals. So I divide everything by negative 9. All right. So when I do that, I have y equals, this is negative 5 over negative 9. So that's 5 over 9. Negative divided by negative is a positive. And then positive 45 divided by negative 9 is going to give me negative 5. All right, so my slope is 5/9. My y-intercept is negative 5. And remember, if it's a y-intercept, you can write it 0, negative 5, like that. All right, so that looks like that's going to be C. 5/9 and then 0, negative 5. All right, use the given condition to write an equation for the line in the indicated form. Passing through 2, negative 4 and parallel to the equation to the line whose equation is y equals negative 5x plus 4. So parallel lines have the same slope. So my new line is going to have a slope equal to negative 5. And we also know that it's going to go through the point 2, negative 4. So it wants me to write this in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y equals form. And I told you how I like to do that. I like to first put it in point slope form and then make it y equals. All right, so I'll say y minus, y sub 1 is negative 4. So that's going to be minus negative 4 or plus 4 equals negative 5 times x minus, and then my x is 2. So that's point slope. Make sure you don't leave it like that. We want slope intercept. So we got to distribute the negative 5. So I have y plus 4 equals negative 5x plus 10. And now to make this y equals, I'll subtract 4 from both sides. So y equals negative 5x plus 6. Make sure you look at all of these look similar, so make sure you got a negative 5x and a positive 6. All right, the next problem says we want to write the equation of a line passing through 3, 2, and perpendicular to the line whose equation is negative 7x plus y minus 3. So we have to figure out the slope of our new line by looking at the given line. So let's make this equation y equals. So you see you have a minus 7x and a minus 3. You want to move both of those over. And you'll have y equals 7x plus 3. Now that's not the answer, okay? So that's just the line that's given. So if we have a line that's perpendicular to that, a perpendicular slope, here's the symbol for perpendicular. It's like an upside down T. The perpendicular slope is going to have the opposite reciprocal slope. So since this was positive, my perpendicular slope is going to be negative, and then the reciprocal of 7 is 1/7. All right, so once I know that's the slope of my new line, let's look at the point that's given, 3, 2. And we want to write this again in slope-intercept form. So we want y equals form. Again, I think y'all know what form I'm going to put it in first here. I'm going to put this in point slope form first, and then I'll make it slope intercept. All right, so y minus y sub 1 equals m, which is negative 1/7, times x minus x sub 1. Now, just because I have a fraction here, don't freak out. I know some students get a little worried when they see fractions, but we're going to multiply this negative 1/7 times the x and the negative 1/7 times the negative 3. All right, so I'm going to have y minus 2 equals negative 1/7 x, and then negative 1/7 times negative 3. That's going to give me a positive 3/7. Because you think about this like it's 3 over 1. Negative times a negative is a positive. 1 times 3 is 3. 7 times 1 is 7. All right, now I want to make this y equals. So add 2 to both sides. Again, don't freak out because you see a fraction and a whole number. We just need to change the whole number into sevenths because this is already in sevenths. This is 3/7. So what you do is we want a denominator of 7. If you want to know what the numerator is, you just say 7 times 2, that's 14. 14 divided by 7 is 2, right? So now we can put 3/7, positive 3/7, and positive 4/7 together. So I'll have y equals negative 1/7 x, and then we just add the numerators. 3 plus 14, that's going to be a positive 17 over 7. All right, so that's my answer. Y equals negative 1/7 x plus 17 over 7. All right, so that's going to be C. Now, the next problem wants us to use the distance formula. The distance formula, hopefully you can remember, but if you can't, here it is equal to the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 squared. All right, so come over here and label your points. So you got your x sub 1 and your y sub 1, and you got your x sub 2 and your y sub 2. All right, so we have the square root of x sub 2 is 7 minus x sub 1 is negative 7, and then all that squared. So remember when you have minus a negative, you got to make that a plus. All right, we'll come back and do that in a second. And then we have plus, now y sub 2, which is 2, minus y sub 1 is negative 4. All right, and we have to square that as well. Again, we have minus a negative, so make sure you make that a plus. All right, so that's going to be the square root of 7 plus 7 squared. So 7 plus 7 is 14. So 14 squared plus 2 plus 4 is 6. So that's going to be 6 squared. So I would work out what's under your denominator, and you can use a calculator. I don't know what 14 times 14 is. So 14 times 14 is 196. So the square root of 196 plus 6 squared is 6 times 6, or 36. So plus 36. So that gives me the square root of 232. Now we need to see if this will simplify. I like to simplify my radicals using a factor tree. And the way you do that is, I know that this is divisible by 2. So 2 times what? Well, I'll say 232 divided by 2, and that gives me 116. All right. Now, I can't break down 2 anymore. But I can break down 116 because since it's an even number, I know you can say 2 times something. So I'm going to say 116 divided by 2, and that gives me 58. Again, that's an even number. So I know I can say 2 times something. So say 58 divided by 2, and I get 29. Okay, there's no way that I can break down 29. So this is the prime factorization. 2 times 2 times 2 times 29 will give me 232. So since this is a square root, for every 2 prime numbers you have, you can take that number to the outside of the radical. So I can take a 2 to the outside of the radical. All right, now I'm left with 2 and 29. Well, what was 2 times 29? It was 58. All right, so that's going to be times the square root of 58. All right, so that's my answer. 2 square roots of 58. And you can see that's B. Now, midpoint is actually one of the easier problems. Whenever you find the midpoint between 2 points, you're really just finding the average. You're finding that point right in the middle. So for midpoint, what you do is you add your x's together and you divide by 2. And then add your y's together and divide by 2. And that'll give you your midpoint. So let's look at our points. We have 7, 4, and 9, -5. So let's add the 2 x's together. 7 plus 9, that's going to be 16 divided by 2. And then 4 plus -5. 4 plus -5 is -1 divided by 2. So you can simplify that a little bit because 16 divided by 2 is 8. And then the other coordinate is just -1/2. So 8, -1/2 is your midpoint. All right, the next problem says write the standard form of the equation of a circle with the given center and radius. So to be able to do that, we need to know the formula for a circle. So the formula for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where hk is the center of the circle and r is the radius of the circle. Now, again, just like with your distance formula, and this actually comes from the distance formula, in your parentheses you have a minus here and a minus here. So whenever you find your center, you have to use the opposite sign here and the opposite sign here. I'll show you what I'm talking about when we work out some of these problems. All right, so we have the center -1, 4, and the radius, -1, 0, and the radius 4. So I'm going to use this formula right here, and my h is -1, and my k is 0. And my r is 4. All right, so I'm going to have x minus, my h is -1. So I'm going to have minus -1, which would be +1. And then don't forget the square up here. Plus y minus, my k is 0. Well, y minus 0 is just y. So I'm going to go back and have to rewrite that one. And then my radius is 4. So I don't just say equals 4, it equals 4 squared, because that's the radius squared. All right, so this is x plus 1 squared. And then again, y minus 0 is just y, so that's plus y squared equals 4 times 4 is 16. All right, so that's what I'm looking for. All right, so that looks like that has to be, I almost chose C, but look, that's a -1 on C. It's a +1 on D. So it is a +1, so we have to choose D. So be careful. All right, same thing on this problem. There's our H is 9, our K is 6, and then our R, our radius, this is a little strange. It's the square root of 6. All right, but we're going to follow that same formula that I have highlighted right here. So that's going to be x minus the H is 9 squared plus y minus the K is 6 equals, now what do you get when you square a square root? When you square a square root, those cancel out. So if I said the square root of 6 times the square root of 6, I would just get 6. So there's my answer. All right, so I have a minus here, I have a minus here, so I got to make sure of that. And then the square root of 6 squared was just 6. So that means it's got to be C. All right, let's look at number 16. We want to find the center and radius. So remember I told you that there's a minus in the formula over here. So whenever we find our H and K, you got to take the opposite signs. So if we found our center for this problem, got to take the opposite signs. So that's going to be, if you have a +7, use -7, that's your H. And then you have a +9, so you have -9 as your K. And then your radius, remember this is r squared. Your radius is r, so take the square root of 81, and you get 9. All right, so that's what we're looking for. -7, -9 with a radius of 9. All right. Now this one wants us to graph the equation. So to graph a circle, and we actually only have two choices. It's going to be hard to miss this one if you just write down the center and the radius, because you see this circle is up here, and this circle right here is down here. So the center is going to be pretty easy to figure out where the circle is if you can just get the center right. So for the center, remember we use the opposite numbers. So I have a -5, so I use +5. And I have -2, so I use a +2 or a +2. And the radius is the square root of 9, and the square root of 9 is 3. So if you go to +5, +2, and then you go right 3, let me see, right 3, up 3, down 3, and left 3, this is all from the center. Then you can draw your little circle right there. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And you have two to look at. Well, which one of these is a circle in the same position as? This one right here. All right, so it's B. All right, so this next problem is an inequality. We want to solve an inequality just like we would an equation. All right, the only difference is if we ever have to multiply or divide by a negative number at the end, you flip the inequality sign. If you don't divide by a negative number or multiply by a negative number, the inequality sign stays the same. That's only division or multiplication at the very end. Let's see what we do on this problem. 2x plus 1 is less than 7. So let's solve this like we would an equation. I'm going to write it up here. 2x plus 1 is less than 7. So if I want to solve for x, I would subtract 1 from both sides. So I have 2x is less than 6. Now to solve for x, I want to divide by 2 on both sides. So I have x is less than 3. All right, so if I had a number line, I'll draw a little number line here. Somewhere I'd have a 0. I'm just going to put a 0 right there. Well, we know that 3 is to the right of 0. All right. So this is x is less than 3. Less than means go to the left. So we would put a parentheses and go to the left, because less than means left. If you want to write that in interval notation, remember to the left forever would be negative infinity. So you could write this as negative infinity to positive 3 with a parentheses. So I believe your answer has both of these. It has this graph and it has the notation. All right, and so this one has to be D, negative infinity to 3. See, it's a parentheses there, shaded to the left. All right, the next problem is an inequality, has an x on both sides. Let's just treat it like we would a regular equation. All right, so let me write it up here. 4x plus 4 is greater than 3x minus 2. All right, so we want to get our x's on one side and our constants on the other, just like we would if it was an equation. It is an equation, it's just an inequality equation. So I'm going to take this x, the positive 3x, and move it over to the left side. So I have x plus 4 is greater than negative 2. And then to get this x by itself, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. So I have x is greater than negative 6. All right, if I want to draw that on a number line, all right, so you know we have a 0 somewhere. So I have a 0 right there. Well, negative 6 is to the left of 0. This is x is greater than negative 6. So there's no equal to sign, so we're going to put a parentheses, and greater than means shade to the right. So parentheses, shade to the right. All right, and so if you want to write that in interval notation, that's parentheses, negative 6, comma, and then to the right forever means infinity. All right, so that's what we're looking for. Make sure it has the interval notation and the graph. And I believe that that is A. All right, the last problem on the test is an absolute value inequality. All right, so I have the absolute value of x plus 8 minus 5 is less than or equal to 1. All right, with absolute value equations or inequalities, you end up having to solve two different inequalities or equations. So before we set up our two equations, though, we want to make sure the absolute value is on one side by itself. I have a minus 5 right here, so first I'm going to move this 5 over by saying plus 5 to both sides. So when I do that now, I have the absolute value of x plus 8 is less than or equal to 6. All right. So now I can set up my two equations, or my two inequalities I'm going to solve. So first, we set one up just like it looks without the absolute value, and you just bring your inequality symbol straight down. The second one we're going to solve, write it down with no absolute value. Here's the trick though. With the second equation, we're going to flip the inequality sign, and we're going to make the right side negative. So it was a positive 6, it's going to be a negative 6. Again, make sure you have your your absolute value by itself. Write down the problem like it looks with the inequality symbol in the same way that it looks in the problem. Then flip your inequality sign and make the right side negative. So we're going to solve these two problems and graph it and see what we get. All right, so let's solve the first inequality. So to get x by itself, I'd say minus 8 minus 8. So I have x is less than or equal to 6 minus 8 is negative 2. All right, in the second problem, to get x by itself, I say minus 8, minus 8. So x is greater than or equal to negative 6 minus 8 is negative 14. All right, so I got to put both of these numbers on a number line. We're going to be less than or equal to negative 2 and greater than or equal to negative 14. That's a lot of numbers. I'm not going to put them all on the number line, though. Let's say I have a 0 right here. All right, and then somewhere close to 0 on the left, I'd have a negative 2. And then let's pretend if I go all the way out here, that's where my negative 14 is. All right, so both of these have an equal to. So we're going to have to use a bracket with both of them. So let's go to where we have negative 2. This says x is less than or equal to negative 2. Remember, less than means to the left. So we're going to put a bracket at negative 2, and we're going to shade to the left. We're not going to go too far, though, because we need to see what's going to happen with this other equation whenever we graph it. This says x is greater than or equal to negative 14. So we put a bracket, and remember that greater than means to the right. So less than meant to the left of negative 2, and greater than meant to the right of negative 14. So if I wanted to write that in interval notation, that would be bracket negative 14, comma, negative 2. All right, so if we look down here at our answers, negative 14, bracket negative 14, comma, negative 2 with a bracket. It's got to be that one right there. I hope that helps. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'll try to get back with you as soon as possible. Good luck on your test.